There comes a moment, usually quiet, usually unplanned, when you walk into your own home and feel like a guest. Maybe it happens in the late afternoon when the light through the kitchen window turns gold and then gray. Maybe it happens at night when you turn off the television and the silence that follows feels louder than the silence before. You look around. The same furniture, the same walls, the same smell of coffee from this morning. And yet, something is missing. Not an object, not a person exactly. Something quieter than that. A feeling. Many people discover this strange sadness long after the noise of life has already left. Not in a single dramatic moment, but slowly, the way frost forms on a window. You don't notice it happening. You only notice that it has already happened. This is a story about that feeling. About homes that once held laughter, arguments, footsteps, the smell of dinner, the sound of doors closing a little too hard, and about what happens when all of that fades. Not because something went wrong, but simply because life moved forward and the home stayed behind. Her name was Liv. She was 67 years old, and she had lived in the same house for 31 years. It was a modest house, the kind you find scattered through small Norwegian towns, wooden, pale yellow, with a sloped roof built to hold the weight of snow. When she and her husband Henrik bought it, they were young enough to believe the house would always feel too small. 2 children, then 3 bicycles in the yard, then noise, so much noise, shoes by the door, music through the walls, arguments about curfews, laughter at midnight, when the children thought she was already asleep. Back then, she used to dream quietly of a moment like this. A house with some peace in it. A house where she could hear herself think. She did not know, back then, that peace can sound a great deal like loneliness if it arrives too suddenly. The children left one by one, the way children do. First to study, then to work, then to lives of their own. In cities far enough away that visits became something you planned weeks in advance, instead of something that simply happened. Henrik passed 6 years ago, quietly in his sleep on an ordinary Tuesday. There was no long illness to prepare her. No slow goodbye. Just a Tuesday, and then a Wednesday that felt entirely different from every Wednesday before it. Liv still made coffee for 2 people, some mornings. Not because she forgot he was gone. She knew. But her hands remembered a rhythm her mind had not yet caught up to. She would notice the second cup sitting there, untouched, and feel something settle in her chest. Not exactly grief anymore, but its quieter cousin. A kind of tiredness that lives in the body long after the mind has accepted the truth. The house did not change much after Henrik died. The same furniture stayed in the same places. His reading chair by the window, his slippers still by the door for almost a year, until one day she finally moved them. Not because she was ready, but because she was tired of stepping around them. People sometimes ask the wrong question about grief. They ask, is it getting easier? But that is not quite how it works. It is not that the grief becomes smaller. It is that you become larger around it. You build a life that has room for the ache instead of waiting for the ache to leave. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only in homes that used to be full. It is different from the silence of a quiet apartment that was always quiet. It is a silence with memory in it. You can almost hear what used to be there. The echo of a kitchen table surrounded by voices. The creak of a door that a teenager used to slam. The hum of a television left on simply so the house wouldn't feel so still. Liv noticed this most in the evenings. The hour after dinner, when the day's small tasks were finished, and there was nothing left to distract her from the shape of the rooms around her. She would sit in the living room with a cup of tea, and the house would settle into its evening. Quiet, the radiators ticking, the wind brushing against the windows, the occasional car passing on the road outside. And in that quiet, she sometimes felt the strange sensation of being both completely at home and completely out of place, as if the house remembered a version of her life that no longer existed, as if she were visiting her own past. She was not unhappy, exactly. That is an important thing to understand about people like Liv, about so many people who reach a certain age and find themselves alone in homes too large for their present life. Their sadness is not loud. It is not a depression that demands attention. It is something softer, a kind of low hum beneath an otherwise ordinary day. You could call it loneliness, but that word feels too simple. It is closer to the feeling of holding a photograph, comforting and painful in the same breath, because it shows you something real that you cannot return to. There is a particular ache that comes from rooms that remember more than you do. The children's old bedrooms, kept mostly as they were, though the posters had long since faded and the toys had long since been given away. Liv would walk past those doors sometimes and feel an instinct to call out a name, the way she used to when dinner was ready. The silence that answered instead was not cruel. It was simply honest. One evening in late autumn, her daughter called, "Mom, the house is too big for you. Have you thought about moving somewhere smaller?" It was not said unkindly. Her daughter meant well. She always had. But something in Liv resisted the question, gently but firmly, the way an old tree resists a storm it has weathered many times before. "This house holds your father," she said quietly. It holds you and your brothers when you were small enough to fit in my arms. I'm not ready to let go of that yet." Her daughter was silent for a moment. "I understand," she said finally. "I just worry about you being alone in there." "I'm not alone," Liv said. "I'm surrounded by everything we built together. That's different from being alone." It was a small lie and a small truth, both at once. This is something worth sitting with, quietly, without rushing to a conclusion. Empty homes are not simply empty of people. They are full of time. Every room holds a version of who you used to be. The parent who once worried about fevers and school exams. The partner who once argued about small things that felt enormous at the time. The person who once believed the noise would never end. When the noise finally does end, what remains is not nothing. What remains is memory, wearing the shape of furniture and walls. There is a reason so many people resist leaving homes that have grown too quiet for them. It is not stubbornness, though it can look that way from the outside. It is something closer to loyalty, loyalty to a version of life that mattered deeply, even if that life has already passed. To leave the home can feel, in some private corner of the heart, like leaving the people who once filled it, even when those people are only gone in the ordinary sense, grown, moved away, living their own full lives elsewhere. Even when the silence is simply the shape that love takes, once it no longer needs daily proof. Winter came, as it always does in that part of the world. Early darkness, slow mornings, snow settling over the rooftops like something patient and inevitable. Liv began a small habit that winter, almost without deciding to. Each evening, she would sit by the window with her tea and watch the neighborhood quietly go still. Lights switching off one by one in other houses, families finishing their dinners, children being put to bed somewhere she could not see. She found, to her surprise, a strange comfort in watching other people's evenings end. It reminded her that the rhythm of life continues, even when your own chapter of it has changed shape. That the warmth she once created in her own home was simply moving elsewhere now, into her children's homes, into her grandchildren's bedtime stories, into kitchens she no longer stood in. It had not disappeared. It had only traveled. There is a kind of peace available to people who can see their loneliness clearly, without flinching from it, and without needing to fix it immediately. Not the peace of having everything resolved, but the peace of no longer fighting against what is true. Liv did not stop missing Henrik that winter. She did not stop noticing the quiet weight of an empty hallway, or the strange ache of setting the table for one. But she began to hold these feelings differently, not as wounds to heal, but as evidence of a life fully lived. You only grieve this deeply, she thought one evening, watching the snow fall outside her window, because you love this fully. The ache and the love were not opposites. They were the same feeling, simply seen from two different distances in time. In early spring, her son came to visit, bringing her youngest grandchild, a boy of 4, full of questions and quick footsteps. For 2 days, the house was loud again. Not loud the way it used to be, with teenagers and slammed doors, but loud in a smaller, gentler way. A child's laughter from the next room, small shoes by the door, a toy truck left on the kitchen floor. When they left on Sunday evening, the house felt quiet again, the way it always did. But this time, Liv noticed something different in herself. She did not feel the silence as an absence. She felt it as a kind of breath, the natural exhale that follows a deep, full inhale. The noise had come, the noise had gone, and the house, like her, had learned to hold both. This, perhaps, is the quiet truth at the center of empty homes. They are not simply spaces where life used to happen. They are spaces that are still happening, only more slowly now, more softly, in a rhythm that matches the person living inside them. An empty home is not a failure of life. It is simply life, after the noise has settled into something quieter. Liv stayed in that house, not because she could not imagine leaving, but because she had made a kind of peace with staying, with the silence, with the memories, with the second teacup she still sometimes set out, only to smile faintly and put it away again. She had learned something many people learn far too late, if they learn it at all, that loneliness and peace are not always enemies. Sometimes, if you sit with them long enough, they become quiet companions. Perhaps you know a home like this. Perhaps you live in one. A home that once held more voices than it does now. A home where the silence sometimes feels less like absence and more like memory settling into the walls. If so, this is not a story asking you to fix that feeling. It is only a story asking you to notice it, gently, without judgment, the way you might notice rain on a window, or the particular blue of an evening sky in winter. Empty homes are strange like that. They ache and they comfort, often in the very same breath. And maybe that is simply what it means to have loved a life fully. To carry rooms inside you that are quieter now, but never truly empty. Wherever you are tonight, whatever quiet room you are sitting in, you are not as alone as the silence sometimes makes you feel. Good night. If this quiet moment resonated with you, you are always welcome here. This channel was created for slow reflections, honest emotions, and the thoughts many people carry silently through life. If you'd like more stories like this, you can gently subscribe and return whenever you need a peaceful place to think, feel, or simply listen. Thank you for spending this moment here tonight. Take care of yourself and rest well.